Predictability. This is often something that happens when you talk about superhero projects, whether it be a TV show, movie, or what have you. It is something that can definitely ruin a project. However, it can also lead to some pretty amazing twists and things that you were not expecting. And honestly, the newest episode of Batman Caped Crusader that I did recently watch, episode 4, did exactly that. And that's why today we're going to be talking Batman Caped Crusader Season 1, Episode 4, breakdown and review. But before we get into anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Alright, Batman Caped Crusader Season 1, Episode 4. This one started out, honestly, when I said predictability, exactly how I thought it would, when Batman did beat up Bullock and Flask. And not only that, but it got captured on camera. Now, the one aspect of this that I did really like is that the photographer actually asked Batman if he wanted him to just destroy the photos, even though it would lead to Selina Kyle being set free because of a lack of evidence. And Batman chose, very rightfully so, to just let it be. He did not care about the consequences because to him, the greater good is what matters, not his reputation, not his name being tarnished. And that's something that is a very Batman thing to do. However, I did predict that it would cause a warfare between Batman and the police, which would sideline a lot of other storylines. And not only that, but it would take away the police's ability to stop Rupert Thorne and the growing crime that is happening in Gotham. And not only that, another thing that I did predict definitely happened in this episode, and you can already see where this story is going to go. And that's the fact that there are going to be two factions in the police force. There's going to be the good faction, who is under Commissioner Gordon, working with Detective Montoya, and working for the good, the betterment of Gotham City. But there's also going to be the other faction, the faction that is loyal to Rupert Thorne, that, for lack of a better term, are crooked cops like Flask and Bullock. And again, I was proven right. This, right off the bat, was shown, and then we had another interesting development that I did not predict, mostly because this character has not been in the story up until this point, and we get introduced to the mayor. And let me just tell you, I can't stand this guy. I'm hoping that he becomes one of the victims of Gotham City because he is honestly the worst. And with what is going on with Harvey Dent, I can almost guarantee that he will be killed in some way, shape, or form, or at the very least imprisoned, because it is implied that he himself is crooked as well. Now, some of the interesting things that did happen in this episode is we are introduced to Firefly, or rather Firebug, which, let me just say, side note, I absolutely hate, especially because multiple times we do have him called Firefly by everyone but him, and he routinely corrects them and says, no, it's Firebug. I'm sorry, that's stupid. We don't need that. Just call him Firefly. We don't care. Firebug is such a stupid name. His name is Firefly. So that is how I'm going to refer to him for the rest of this video. Now, that being said, they do start to try to track down the Batman. Commissioner Gordon does create a task force, which I kind of thought would happen. However, instead of putting Bullock and Flask in charge, he put Detective Montoya in charge. And I think that's a really good choice because he himself knows that Flask and Bullock, by this point, are crooked, or at the very least, they're not morally good. He knows something is up with them. And he even says a big reason why they're not being involved in this task force, or at the very least not leading the task force, is because they were the two police officers who ended up in the paper. They're the two police officers that started this feud with Batman. This very public thing that now all of Gotham is starting to comment on and take sides on. And this is the reason that the mayor cares so much about it. It's election season, so all he cares about is getting a really big headline that will help his case and help his campaign, which again just makes you dislike the mayor even more. Again, all he cares about is becoming mayor once again, not the greater good of the people. So he is a really easy character to dislike, and as this episode progresses, you really see that more and more. Now, with that being said, we do have multiple instances in which Detective Montoya sets up different traps, if you want to call them, for Batman. However, the one thing that I really do like about how they do this is that Batman not only doesn't fall for it, but they make it a point to show that even though he knows that these are traps, we see him still investigating. He just does it with caution. And he does this to make sure that no one is actually in danger. And once he verifies that this is just some sort of police stakeout, this is just some attempt to arrest him and apprehend him, he leaves almost every time. However, the last time he does end up tying up those two police officers, to me, I don't think he really thought that guy was really getting mugged. He just was getting pissed and decided, you know what, I'm going to tie you both up because you do have a knife out, so I'm at least a little justified in doing this. We do get a little bit of a police chase. It realistically goes nowhere, except making the police look like fools, which leads to another headline. And guess what? Guess who sees the headline? Yeah, the mayor, the wonderful mayor. And what does he do? Blames Commissioner Gordon immediately and all but threatens his job. Which, again, is just making this character of the mayor that much more unlikable, and it continues throughout this episode. Then we have something pretty interesting occur. We have Dr. Harleen Quinzel once again re-enter the story, however, not in a normal traditional therapist sense. She instead is giving a briefing to the task force with a psychological profile on the Batman. And not only that, but how best to capture him. And realistically, what she says makes a lot of sense. However, a little bit too much sense, because guess what happens? Flask and Bullock decide to take things into their own hands, and they do free Firefly. Yes, Firefly. And they end up taking him, take all his gear, and say, oh no, we're having engine trouble, get out. And then Firefly is able to escape with all of his gear, and what does he do right away? Sets fire to a few buildings, and Flask and Bullock then call it in, announce that they do have a fire and that they do have a Batman sighting. So we do get a showdown between the police, Firefly, and Batman. However, one of my issues with this episode, in my opinion, it just really lacked action. And I feel like through 4 episodes, that's something that continues to happen. And I really have gone into this series wanting to like it. I love Batman. He's one of my favorite DC characters. So obviously a project with Batman is something that I inherently want to enjoy. However, it does, in all honesty, feel a little boring at times. And the action feels very, very lackluster. And that's a real big shame, because I feel like with the technology available for animation today, we should be able to have better fights than we had in the 90s. However, if you ask me which shows objectively have better action sequences, I'm going to say the 90s. Not just because I prefer the actual series, but because the action is inherently better. So that's something that I do hope improves going forward. To me, so far, the best actual action sequence was between Batman and Clayface, and it was a sword fight, so it wasn't even the traditional Batman combat that we're used to seeing. So again, that is one thing that I am really, really hoping improves. Another thing I did not like about this episode, we did not get Alfred at all. Not only that, Batman, the title character, was barely in it. Just like in the second episode with Clayface, we focused way more on the characters from the police force. And while I do agree they are important to the story, the show is called Batman Caped Crusader. So the fact that Batman did not have the most screen time for the second time in 4 episodes, to me, is a huge, huge issue. And not only that, he did not appear as Bruce Wayne one time in this entire episode. Again, to me, that is inherently a huge issue. If you look back at other series, Batman the Animated Series, for example, which I'm constantly going to compare this show to, had a very good balance between Batman, Bruce Wayne, and whatever antagonist the episode was about. Now, did they have certain episodes where Batman did not appear that much? Yeah, they did. But guess what? They didn't do it twice within the span of the first 4 episodes. And that is my issue, especially because, unlike Batman the Animated Series, we're not getting 20, 25, 30 episode seasons. This season is much more finite. I'm 99% sure that season 1 is only 10 episodes, and season 2 is only going to be 10 episodes. So again, the fact that you are not having the title character much more active in each episode is a huge issue. And it's something that I hope they do not do again, because if you have 3 episodes like that in 10 episodes, that to me is a huge issue, especially because it's more of a balance in the other 2 episodes. It's not him heavily in it both episodes. I would say, again, it's more of a balance between characters. So that's kind of my 2 cents, some of my big issues with this episode. However, some of the other things that I did really enjoy about it was some of the action sequences. Now, again, I know I just ranted about there being a lack of action and fighting. However, the whole fire scene and Batman taking down cops, that was pretty cool. The fight between Batman and Firefly literally lasted about 15 seconds, so that one was really lackluster and lame in my opinion. However, we do get something really cool, and that is when Flask and Bullock do confront Firefly. He says, "Hey, I'm out of juice. I give up," puts his hands up, and then Flask looks at Bullock and says, "He'll talk." So Bullock, in cold-blooded murder, literally offs him right then and there. However, it gets even worse than that because he falls out the window onto a car in front of all the people. And the photographer is right there and takes a picture, not only of the dead body, but also of Bullock. So, you see this and you think, oh no, now they're going to turn on Bullock, maybe they'll start to see those cops are corrupt? No, it's actually the exact opposite. They praise him for what he did and paint him as a hero. However, I'll get into that and my slight issues with that a little bit later, because we then do see Commissioner Gordon take matters into his own hands, and he does go into the burning building to save some people. He does have a standoff against Batman, and this is one of the moments that I was talking about a little bit earlier that I really liked, and that's that he has that standoff with Batman. However, as Batman turns, Commissioner Gordon sees he's holding 2 kids, and not only that, he says to him, "There's one more in there." So Commissioner Gordon then goes in there, gets the kid, and they get out of there. He's not concerned with turning in Batman at that point. He is concerned with getting those kids to safety, the most important thing. And that's why Commissioner Gordon really is one of my favorite characters, especially in this series, because he is so morally good. And one of the things he wants to do most is stop the corruption within the police force so that they can properly protect Gotham. And that's something that I really enjoy, and something I'm really excited to see unfold throughout this series. However, we do then go to the end, and unfortunately, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, Flask and Bullock are in Commissioner Gordon's office, and he says that he's going to take their badges away, and they are going to be off the police force. But wait, before he can finish, he gets a phone call from guess who? Oh yeah, the wonderful mayor, and guess what the mayor says? "Do you see the papers? Yeah, well, those guys are heroes. I want them to be the head of the task force. They're going to answer to me, and I want you to just provide them with anything they want." So essentially, Commissioner Gordon has no power at this point, and now both of them have the power. And that's when you get a really interesting interaction between Commissioner Gordon and Flask, and it's after Commissioner Gordon hangs up the phone, Flask looks at him and says, "Let me guess, that was about us he was talking about." And that's how you know right in this moment, and you see Commissioner Gordon go through this realization that not only are both of these 2 officers corrupt, and not only is a large majority of the police force corrupt, but there's a very good chance that the mayor is also corrupt. Why else would he want these 2 who are very obviously corrupt, who have done horrible things, why would he want them in charge of this task force? Why would he want me to essentially answer to them, to do everything I can to make sure they are successful? So again, then we do get that scene of Barbara, Commissioner Gordon, and Detective Montoya in that bar at the end, and they are just feeling down in the dumps. And to me, I feel like this is definitely going to lead to Commissioner Gordon reaching out to Batman, because he's going to realize that he alone does not have the power to stop this corruption, especially because the person above him, the mayor, is really implied to also be corrupt. So it's not something that he's going to be able to take down from within, at least not on his own. He's going to need someone from the outside to also assist. And who is that going to be? None other than the Batman. So that's one thing that I am really looking forward to as this series progresses. And I don't know if they're going to make it Detective Montoya, Commissioner Gordon, or Barbara Gordon who does reach out to Batman. In my opinion, I think the most likely person is going to be Commissioner Gordon, with the second most likely option being Barbara Gordon. I just feel like they have the best chance of making a connection with Batman, especially considering the interactions they've had with Batman to this point. However, I am really excited either way, and I do hope this series does continue to pick up in positive ways and diminish the amount of of negative things that I continue to have to say about this series. Because again, I love Batman, I want to enjoy this show, however I'm also going to be objective when I am watching and reviewing each episode. I'm not going to say it's amazing if it is absolutely horrible. But let me know what all of you think. What did you think of episode 4? Did you think Firefly was a better name than Firebug? Because I sure do. Let me know in the comments down below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And I'll see all of you in the next video. Goodbye.